So, welcome everyone. This is Dr. Alana James, and it is the 7th of April. I'm really excited to have this conversation. I think we should start with the awareness that when we surveyed 100, so far 160 surveys have come in from doctoral students, mostly doctoral, some master's students around the world, about the 5 frustrations that are most likely or have been shown by research to be the ones most likely to cause student disengagement. The idea of support, 72% of those students who responded say that support comes up for them at least once or twice a month, and that 50% of those students, so 80 of 160, say that it happens to the extent that it makes them feel like maybe they are not in the right place. And so it's a very, very important conversation, and one that I hope we have a great conversation about today. So I encourage you to type in questions and comments. When I come to the junctures, I'll go back and see what you're saying. And then I look forward at the end to hearing which points were the ones that hit home for you. I like to start with quotes. And the two today are from 2 documents I don't know at all, but I like the quotes. There are going to be times when you learn more about the world you're entering and feel defeated, when you see the gap between the ideal and the reality. But that's something we all face. The people that face those obstacles and overcome them are people whose dreams come true. And also, I want you, and I think I want everyone to have big dreams, big goals. I want everyone to strive to achieve them. And I hope never to see people beating themselves up every time they make a mistake. I'm 100% behind Kelly Armstrong with that. And I think sometimes we do beat ourselves up, and then that puts us into a place where when we look for support, we aren't in the right place to be looking for support, and we're less likely to find exactly the right support. So today's agenda is to start with Jane's story. It's not her real name, but she is a real person, and it is a real story. And I'm going to introduce you to a tool that I hope turns out to be useful for you. Then we're going to look at some research concepts that I find particularly provocative when we talk about the ideas of support, from neuroscience, from education, from the things we know in educational research about cultural considerations, and then PhD research in particular. We'll finish Jane's story with her matrix and the matrix that would come from Master's Net and Doctoral Net. You'll know more about that in a minute, and then a conclusion. So that's the path we are taking. Let's talk about Jane. Jane has her PhD now, but at one time she was sure that she was never going to get it. She was at a prestigious university in Europe. She was working in a laboratory when I met her, doing daily experiments on cellular behavior under particularly stressful conditions. Some of the stresses of those conditions were that she almost never saw her supervisor, who was out raising funds for other projects. When she did see him, she felt like he wasn't particularly supportive of her, and in fact, in the last year, had made her feel stupid whenever he saw her. She was getting close to the time when a thesis was required. If, for those of you in the U.S., thesis is the word the Europeans use for their dissertation. It's funny how the 2 words are flipped in the 2 parts of the world. But she would say she had to turn her thesis in within the year, and she had absolutely no idea how to get started or what was supposed to go where or how she was going to do this, and she did not see any support coming from her supervisor. And so then she went to the Graduate Studies office, and their focus, rightfully so because it was a process-oriented issue, but not so helpful to her was that she should have had a contract with their supervisor from year one, and then when things break down, they can look at whose side of the contract isn't being met. However, she didn't have a contract, and so their pushing her to get one felt like going backwards. By the time I met her, she was pretty hysterical. So we're going to introduce this concept today of this matrix of support. And there are 3 places to go for support. Your inner support is must be your first place of refuge. And if you don't have inner support systems that are strong enough to hold you up, all the rest of the support you find will be what would be called in the United States a Band-Aid, or Europeans would say a plaster. People develop inner supports in many ways: meditation, yoga, religious practices, watching TED Talks, reading the 365 motivational emails that Margie does, doing a 30-day work-life balance. There are lots of things we do to help ourselves get stronger. Now, another kind of support is the university support or other kinds of academic supports. And people and connections on campus help you feel better, and they are also primarily there to help control the process for a large number of people. So in a sense, it's their job to help you get through. But not everything they put up is going to be helpful to every person, nor, even if the ones are helpful, will they be at a time or a place that you can make them. So those are the challenges of the particular time and place we are in with higher education, and the transference from a world that was campus-based to a world that is all over the place about how we find support. There's lots of evidence, however, that if you engage in whatever university, campus, or non-campus life there is a significant correlation between that engagement and graduate students finishing in a timely manner. So at the very least, you should be aware of what activities are available. And then during the research that we're going to discuss as we go on, we're going to make lots of comments about peer support groups, and they can be found in other places. And not to forget your librarians. They're often an underutilized resource for help. Depending on the relationships you have with your university, that person, which is called in different parts of the world, supervisor, advisor, mentor, or committee chair, that person who is your first contact for your graduate work has a dual role, and there will be a continuum of how they meet that role and how much support they give along the different aspects. At the end of the day, that person is employed by the university to make sure that no slough work gets published. So in a sense, they are a gatekeeper against work getting in. That's what they're paid to be. Some of them will also be very supportive and teachers, etc., but not always. And your university, most of you here have a university subscription to DoctoralNet, or you've bought one for yourself. And then there are things that we do, and then with constraints that we work under as well. And some of those constraints have to do with time and money. So some students also in this academic range seek outside coaching, outside editing, statistics help, etc. Those are paid for services, whether they're from us or from other people. So there's a lot of different kinds of things that go under academic support. Finally, family, friends, and network. I have it just listed here as family, so it fits in the box, but it's much more than that, isn't it? It's every place you go to other people who will support you, and some of those supports will understand the doctoral process, and some of them will not, and those that will not may make you feel better, but they also may wonder what the hell you're doing. So that's all the types of support. Now, out of each kind of support, I think it's very useful for you to consider which require only a passive amount of activity from you and which require an active, for you to be active in the process. And we'll talk more about that when I go through the research on neuroscience. Sometimes you just want to sit there. Sometimes you want to have impact. And then finally, each kind of support has two subsets. So it's kind of an odd matrix because it breaks at the bottom. But for inner support, for academic support, or for family support, sometimes you're going to go to those places because you need some information or to move ahead on this process or the ideas involved. Sometimes you go to those places just because you want to feel better. So within this matrix of support, my hypothesis is that when 72% of doctoral students or graduate students tell us they don't find the right support, I suspect that they aren't necessarily looking in the right places for the right support, or they haven't thought about support enough from this kind of a break it out, what do I really want to do here point of view, that they're going to go out, try a few things they've tried before that have worked in other situations, and when they don't work in this much more complex situation, they get frustrated and they say they don't have enough support. Can I just get hands up if you think my hypothesis has merit? That if it's as much as 72%, that people are got to be looking at least some of the time in the wrong place. What do you think? Mark thinks so. Yep, hands going up. Okay, good. Sometimes it's nice to have hypothesis checked. Yes and no. Adrian, I'll hang out for a second while I'm reading others for you to explain the yes and no part a little bit. And Adrian, I'm seeing your would be great to have daily accountability check-in section. I don't think the site is maybe the place for it, but I think we certainly can do that. And I am moving it right now over to my tech person's note, if I can find her. And so she's going to have this interesting. Oh, that's all you have to do, by the way, is say, would it be nice to have? And we'll be on it, and we'll see when it's possible. That's how we grow. And then we grow when universities tell us what they want you to have. So Adrian may be still typing. I'll go on, and aha, here we go. Look everywhere for the kind of support I need, but it seems it's not offered anywhere. That's why the note. Great. I mean, not great that you can't find the kind of support you need, but great that you are hooked to us, and please tell us every time you look everywhere for the kind of support you need, because that's what a technology company that is growing looks for, is feedback. And you as an early adopter have a wide range. And oftentimes, Mark is expressing the frustration of online students, which is sometimes it feels like you're working with bots rather than people. And there can be certainly situations in the online world where that's true. We think that, and are committed actually to a technology that goes to scale with personal conversations as well. And it's a challenge, but it's a challenge that I think technology is taking on, but that's another conversation. Let's go into this matrix. I've explained these different pieces, so I can skip this slide. Let's look at Jane's story for just a moment. She did not have this matrix. We hadn't developed it at the time, but if she would have, from the things I learned about her later, she would have said that she watched lectures, she read books, she watched TED Talks, she liked workbooks, she liked checklists of things to do. She did a little yoga. She had attended some lectures and some support groups at her university, and she actually ended up finding something that we do every so often called an accelerator program, which is like a boot camp online. And so the box that is active and academic support turned out to be the box, and we'll talk more later on about how she came to all the things she came to. She also took a walk on campus as an activity, and she had talked to everybody about this problem. Because, as I said, by the time she found us, she was a little hysterical. She was seriously thinking that things weren't going to go forward. So that's kind of, I think, a pretty, pretty generic student matrix. All right, let's talk about what the research would suggest we need to look for. And again, I'm reading from notes, but you'll have to take them because they're just short and sweet slides today. All right, from neuroscience, we see three kinds of support that we can give ourselves. So this comes from us to us, and we can, because of the way our brains are hardwired. These will be things that support patterns that will support us and our neural pathways. So these have a heavy lift to them, I think is a good way of putting that. Collaborative work. All right, now not everyone is wired to work with other people. Sometimes we come from backgrounds that are didn't teach us to trust or like other people. Sometimes we've had bad experiences, etc. However, put all that aside, if we do work in groups, then our brains like it. They hold on to what happens there more than they hold on to what happens when we work by ourselves. The synapses fire. So what do you look for? Look for a stimulating mix of disciplines, goal-focused activities, attitudes that are nurturing rather than demanding, or if they're demanding or threatening, because non-threatening, because it puts you in a place where you want to get, somebody held your feet to the fire, but you're moving forward at a pace that you're also comfortable enough with. Group work should not allow you to passively sit. So in that regard, those of you who choose to type into a webinar who are active are more likely to get out of the webinars than the people who watch by recording. Now, of course, people have to watch by recording because we can't run them 24/7. But still, it's something to be aware of and good for you guys who come. This is a direct quote from a particular award-winning reading and writing group. Students were required to draft an article or chapter to be read and discussed by the group, to read the drafts of other members of their group. The time commitment for GRIP, that was the name of the group, was attendance at 1 2-hour workshop per month, and the time required to draft the material and read the material of other group members, which was probably 20 or 30 hours. So they were writing for journal articles. So that's a lot of commitment. However, out of the all but 2 of the people who were in the group got published. So it was also a hugely successful group. So what you get, in a sense, collaborative work, outcome, make it varied, and you get what you put out. You get out of it what you put into it, especially if it's well designed. Hypersensitivity to change. Because we are hypersensitive to any change, things that we are currently doing a lot of times in our modern society, such as notification noises that come in on our phone, are really disruptive to our thought process. So be aware of it. They add stress, they create burnout, and the best thing you can do for your inner supports is to block time to put yourself in an environment that works. Some people like to work in a coffee shop, other people like to work in silence, whatever it is for you, but nobody disturbs you. Everybody, you put a sign on the door that says, I am writing, and you do that. So that will help you focus and eliminate the hypersensitivity to change. I think the reason coffee shops work for people is they're so constant that it desensitizes that same hypersensitive. And then I mentioned this on Tuesday, but I'll say it again. I'm particularly taken with the work of Robert Cialdini at the moment. His new book, Persuasion, talks about how we can set ourselves up for success by what we do beforehand. And I'm actually going to tell you 2 stories from this. Acor in 2010, in a book on happiness and how we set ourselves up, commented on a research. I'm not sure I like the ethics of this research, but evidently Asian female students were split into 2 groups. One group just before taking a test. Hopefully it wasn't a very important test. Because just before, one group was reminded that as Asians, they are known to do well in STEM fields, and this mathematics test, obviously they were being primed that they were going to do well. The other group was reminded that they were women, and women didn't usually do well. And no surprises, but certainly, as I said, the ethics of this is just something else. But it was true that those that reminded themselves that they were Asian and should do well did much, much better. So what do we tell ourselves before we go into stressful situations? How can we persuade ourselves for our best performance? And then I should ask questions like, to what extent does your work environment subtly influence your awareness of the positive potential outcomes of your work as a graduate student? When you write, do you literally have those that you write for in your field of reference? Have you taken a few moments to center yourself in the big feelings of the outcome you're going to have from this writing before you write? So you move your entire biology behind you when you do those kinds of exercises. Comments? Questions? The next one is, what does education tell us? We've got some agreement about white noise. I think it does. I think you can have so much noise that you don't hear anything, or you can have no noise. And, you know, variations, different kinds of music, etc. Also, with the brain thing, I didn't mention the different brain waves, and there are different companies that put out focus music that work with the alpha and beta and theta brain waves. I think I might bring that up again later. Okay, education research, peer-to-peer support has always shown to be a very good thing. My experience with it has been that you better find your right peer, because with graduate students, it seems to start and then sort of peter out. But if the peers complement each other, And if you have someone who is strong enough who will disagree and argue with you, and will go off to their own space and then come back and collaborate closely, those seem to be the working environments that make peer-to-peer support highly successful. And then I came across, and this is a space to watch out for because I don't know very much about it yet, but I did start to seek out what the new frontiers are in terms of learning faster. And no surprises, there are new frontiers opening up. So, you know, in the next year, we'll probably see more of this as I get to investigate it. But few tidbits that we know for sure. Don't multitask. Actually, our brains don't multitask. What they do is do one thing and then another thing quicker and quicker, but they do not multitask. However, don't do the same thing for hours and hours and hours. The brain does need to have, to come up for air, to have different environments. So you might have two kinds of work going on and spend one until you get tired, physically feeling a little tired and burned out, and then switch. And don't neglect to take physical breaks, walk around, drink water, etc. in the middle. Another thing that's happening is this idea of listening to video and audio on as fast a speed as you are comfortable. Do any of you do that? Watch and listen on a fast speed? I had heard of it once before, and another thing I've heard of is that people are watching video but with no sound, but watching it with the captions, because your mind picks up words differently than it hears. So we can play with these video and audio devices. But the thing about speed is it evidently, when tested, people who had them on up to 3 times the speed, almost to the point where you couldn't understand what was being said, tested out to have the same amount of recall as people who watched them. And Mark's exactly right about there are some tasks that require your brain to segment and jump very quickly. Because literally, Mark, we know that the brain doesn't multitask. It doesn't, the synapses do fire consistently on one task and then another task. They don't fire across each other. But you can set it up very, very quickly, and certainly air traffic control would be that. And Adrian, then watching a video at 4 times the speed might up your anxiety level as well. As I said, these are not necessarily things that work for everyone, but I was interested in the idea that just like when they broke the 4-minute mile, and then all of a sudden lots of people were breaking the 4-minute mile, there is quite a bit of research going on both in the business world and in the educational research world on speed of learning. So as I said, watch this space. Now, all of this is good, are good ideas about support, but we have to take our cultural background into account. There's a lot of research, and I mean a lot of research, about what are called underrepresented populations and international students not doing as well in university environments as other people. And I think that at this point, the diversity on a university campus is it has been pushed to the point where lots of people don't feel they fit in for lots of reasons. And this concept of fitting in and finding the support we need are integral to each other, but they also harken back to our childhood experiences. And so we just need to be aware that the totality of us has a lot to do with where we grew up in the world, what the expectations from that part of the world were in terms of what support meant. And specifically around the role of reciprocal obligations and responsibilities. So when Mark talks about lack of support at his online universities, having less a feeling from them of their reciprocal obligations and responsibilities to him as a student, some portion of that comes from his expectations of what those roles and responsibilities would have been at other kinds of institutions. And the online institutions aren't living up to those reciprocal obligations and responsibilities. I think that's a great phrase. And I think all of us need to look at that in terms of what our expectations are. And then have conversations about that if we're interacting with people and it's clear that their understanding of that and our understanding of that are different, we have a place to have a conversation. Mentoring, so there's this idea of when we fit in, and when we fit in, it's easier to feel supported. And then there's this idea of where are these roles of reciprocal obligation and responsibility. And one of those is mentoring. Now, some universities actually call their people who are helping a graduate student through a mentor, which in my experience, some will be and some won't be, because some people aren't wired to really be mentors, because the word implies several things. It implies that I have enough expertise that I easily can help you through the process. It implies that you and I have enough of a mutual respect with each other that we can negotiate the changes that naturally occur as part of the process and throughout the process. So mentoring is an appropriate word if I am going to help you get from A to B, and you will have some responsibilities and mutual roles of reciprocal obligations and responsibilities will be negotiated throughout, and then some mentoring relationships change and grow with the person who is changing and growing, become actually peer relationships and are quite satisfactory over a long period of time. But those are by far the least likely to happen because, after all, we're complex human beings, and that's almost as good as a good marriage. So there's some conversation I'll catch up with in a minute, but I also just want to bring into this idea social supports, because people who are not wired to enjoy person-to-person conversations may be wired to online social supports better. Look for groups, again, that are stimulating, include a mix of disciplines and goal-oriented activities. Don't lurk, be active. And then finally, throughout all of this, less and less a doctorate is a stepping stone to an academic career. So rather, most of you will be using this degree to go on to some kind of other activity. Something like 50% of people are being hired to jobs that weren't even created 15 years ago. So we don't actually know all the places this degree will take you. So keep an eye on the transferable skills you're learning, especially those that have to do with data and data collection, because that is going to be a very big thing in the next few years. And all of these things come into play when you consider the supports you need. Now, I'm going to go back and read. Same scenarios repeatedly. Mark's talking more about the air traffic control. Don't consider my advisor a mentor because she doesn't have the time to guide me through the process. Not that she's doing a terrible job as an advisor, though. Exactly. Those words are listed by the university, and then And sometimes advisors and committee chairs are different people. Sometimes they're the same person. Universities set this up. And so if we look at all of these things, how would, this is me, of course, always coming to how do doctoral net and master's net fit into these ideas? And I would ask for your help to see if you agree. I see the things we do with information on positive psychology, what is known, those webinars as being pretty passive, but good for you and your inner support systems. I see the 365 motivations as being those, that passive inner support on a process or ideal level, but also very much helping people feel better. And we judge these things according to what kind of testimonials we get from students on them. On a more active level, but again, I think focused on inner support systems, developing inner support systems, are the 30-day work-life challenge, balance challenge, and the webinars and discussion, again, I think are feel-goods more than active process ideas. Academically, of course, all the content on the site. Milestone checklist makes it a bit more active. 30-day writing challenge makes it a bit more active. Feeling better, 365. Content on time management, work-life balance. And I think then the 30-day writing challenge also has a feeling better aspect to it on the academic side. Personal supports, editing. There's a caveat here that when we do these things, they're not for free or with a standard membership. But editing and coaching, I think, are that place where you get personal support that is also academic. And editing is pretty passive. Looking at the articles and outside resources can be passive. Actively, you can go to our Skype chat, ask questions, get coaching. So that's how I see what we do break out for this. Disclaimer. Yeah, disclaimer is what I put on the thing. So, how did Jane do it? So Jane did it by, I'm going to go back to that last. We occasionally, when we see a need from a lot of people, or it takes probably 5 or 6 people because it's an expensive thing to do, we'll run something like a boot camp. And it runs, depends on the people, depends on the time. I think the one she did ran once a week. The group met like this in this kind of environment. And then everybody went off and did their own work and read their own work and came back. So it was a very it was 6 weeks, and everybody got their proposal pretty well mapped out, if not written. And that gave her what she needed in terms of the what goes where. And it gave her the support that she needed, that she wasn't crazy, that she didn't just understand this stuff, which is what she was kind of understanding. Her supervisor was telling her, didn't know the man, so I don't know if he really meant those things, but that's how she heard them. She also went to counseling at her university. They had some mental health services, and the mental health services helped her hysteria really chill out. So that gave her some that hit the active inner support systems. We hit the active academic support systems, and she progressed. And by the end of the summer, she was fine. And by the end of the following year, she was writing me a note that she finished her university work. She took another 6 months to finish her thesis. I think she went to Switzerland or something to read it. She she had her Viva the following May. They had very few changes and she was done. So, but if she had not looked at, when she was saying, I can't find the support, she was very much trying to put these two boxes together, and it wasn't successful. So it was successful for her to get them. Now, I have a few things to say here about organizations, and I'm interested to see what you think. I talk to students who are working with their university, and they're telling me their university doesn't give them the supports they need. And I really like Margaret Wheatley and her work on self-organizing systems. What she would say is that every organization that we are in is self-organizing, and that a portion of how to make it get better, and actually what leaders in the organization are wanting to hear, is how to make it get better from everyone's point of view. So there's two outcome conclusions that I kind of take with me after working on support for a week. One is that we're all in it together, and I really encourage all of you to tell your university what is working for you as much as what is not working for you. You will get more of what works, and they don't hear it much, and so it's a relief, because in fairness, most of the people who work in university offices hear the complaints probably 6 to 1 more than they hear the, this is great, I really like it. So that will stay with them. Their minds will notice it because they're hypersensitive to change, and it's much more likely that it will go forward. So do that. Help be part of the self-organizing system that is your university. Okay, I'm really open to you making comments about how you found this webinar, what worked for you, what you thought was interesting. If anything didn't fit, please let me know. And I have an article which is in rough draft form. I would draft it one more time, and then anybody who would like to see it, I would be happy to send you a copy if you are willing to send it back to me, marked up with comments and ideas and questions. As I said, when you see data that says 72% of students feel that this is an issue, I really would like to be a voice to help this issue, help students help this issue go away. So to that extent, give me a scale of 1 to 5. How good is this content in helping people both understand the roots of where they are and also have ideas that will help their support issues go away? And as you're writing and telling them, the 2 things I want to tell you about Doctoral Net is that all the webinars are up for this quarter, so go to Big Marker and sign up for any you want to see, because you'll need to be signed up in order to see the recordings. And if you can't make them, many of the people who were here today do make them, but especially for those of you who do watch recordings, make sure you're signed up. And university members from all the different universities, watch for the survey coming out from your university, because it's very important to help your university work with us to plan the things that you're going to have available in terms of support next. So those are my news. Type away, or for that matter, and welcome, Marfa. I didn't see you had come in. This was recorded, and so you'll have option to see the part. In fact, I'll turn off the recording now. Thank you to everybody who watches that way. Remember, you can turn up the speed, and maybe your mind will work a little differently. We'll talk more about that in other sessions.